Welcome to the weekly Helm developer meeting, February 11th, 2021. Not sure how that's a date that exists in the world, but it is. Who knew? It looks like today we have one announcement about Artifact Hub. I'm not sure who added that one. So who would like to talk about Artifact Hub values schema reference?
Yeah, I forgot to put my name next to it. Since I added everything else on the agenda today, please somebody else add something. I saw it blank and I had things to talk about. I thought it was a really interesting thing, and I blogged about it today. If charts have a JSON schema in them, the Artifact Hub, if your thing's up on there, will give you a reference, and it puts the YAML next to the JSON schema and makes it searchable. So you can start searching things. And so the documentation is next to your structure, and you can kind of navigate the whole thing. So if you've got a really nicely filled out schema, it'll actually tell people what's in there and how to use it, default values, requirements, all that stuff. And it puts the JSON schema to use. I thought that was a really neat use, and I hadn't even thought of anything like that yet.
Fantastic. So we have a link there. People can go to artifacthub.io and read the blog there. Words are hard. All right, we have some discussion topics. And it looks like they're mostly from Farina, because why not? Farina, we appreciate you. I want to talk about what we should do when a release fails to update.
Coming. All right. So this issue is we have an inconsistency in Helm. And so we've got this problem. So let's say you install, so there's the release object that we store in the cluster. By default, it's a secret, but you can configure it to be other things. And let's say you do a Helm install. And after it installs everything and it goes fine, it then goes to store the release object in the cluster and says, hey, this installed, right? What happens if that fails? Do you mark the whole Helm command as failed or not? Do you return an error? Or do you just post something to standard out saying stop doing the release to fail? In Helm, we're inconsistent. So on a Helm install, it does one thing, but on upgrade and rollback, it does something else. And so we are inconsistent. Sometimes it returns an error, and so the Helm CLI is going to error out and say, hey, non-zero exit code, there was a problem. And in other cases, it's going to display that as an error message, but exit with a zero exit code because the application actually went in. And so inside of Helm, we're inconsistent. And I kind of wanted to talk about that fact.
Yeah, okay. So, and what would be a better way to do it? Oh, go ahead, Butcher.
In which case does it do which thing?
So on upgrade and rollback, it returns an error. And on install, it displays a message. And on install, there is a comment before it displays a message, and it's in the meeting notes, but it says, this is a tricky case. The release has been created, but the result cannot be recorded. The truest thing to tell the user is that the release was created. However, the user will not be able to do anything further with this release. One possible strategy would be to do a timed retry to see if we can get this stored in the future. And it just displays to output the error, but it doesn't return an error from Helm. And so we are inconsistent in the way we handle that. And I'm not saying what the right thing is, just that we're inconsistent in the way we handle this. And so should we be consistent? If so, which way should we go?
Is the situation for the upgrade even valid?
Well, it upgrades. It'll actually upgrade all the Kubernetes assets, and then afterwards it tries to store the upgraded release object, the secret, and say, hey, the upgrade was successful, and then that bails. But Kubernetes was actually able to upgrade everything you were doing. It just bails on recording the secret. So it's totally an edge case. But this is how our code is. It's probably why nobody complains much about it, but our code is inconsistent here. Should we display a message to output, or should we return an error?
So I am 87% sure I'm the one who wrote the install case the way it is, because I'm well aware of that comment, and I probably wrote it. And Adam and I have talked about this this decision was made like 4 years ago, I think, right? So it's and was from Tiller. We never came up with a satisfactory answer for what you should do, because essentially all your artifacts are there, right? Everything's installed. And it's just a failure of etcd to be able to store something at that point, right? But we essentially, you'll have a release out there that is, if it got recorded, which it must have to have gotten to that, it'll show up in your release records as pending, I think, or installing. Maybe installing it is the record that you'll have there, right? So you have to keep in mind that as we create releases, we create multiple iterations of the same record. It starts out pending, then goes to installing, then goes to installed, then it goes to upgraded, and so on, right? Superseded, I think, is the next. So you never end up with a case where you have a Helm thing installed all the way, but no record at all of the release. The question is, what should the last record have been? If storage fails, do you roll it back and destroy the record, or do you leave the record stuck there and installing? And so we left it stuck there and installing. So when an operator goes and does a Helm LS, they'll see that something is wrong with that particular thing, and hypothetically would take steps to remedy it. However, they have to actually go look and see that it's in that particular case.
But
I don't know about that.
On Helm install, we'll display the message, and Helm, the CLI, will exit with a 0 exit code. On Helm upgrade or rollback, if you end up in that same situation, we exit with a non-0 exit code and display the error.
Yeah, and my guess is the reason the exit code is 0 is because of Tiller, because that was code that was just ported straight over from the Tiller days into the.
So should we
at that point, Tiller no longer had a connection with the client.
So at that point, should we go ahead and change it from displaying the message to giving a non-0 exit code, since we had that problem? It's actually a trivial change.
It's definitely an error condition, so yeah.
Okay. Because
I like the idea of displaying a non-zero code if you have a non-zero status of sadness. People appreciate knowing that the sadness is there.
Okay. Because that all was brought out because there is a pull request to, let's say you were unable to clean up the last. So normally you store the last 10, and when you do an upgrade, you're 11th, so you pop one off the other end and you clean it up. If you're not able to clean that up, should it return an error? Or display a message? I think it really wasn't able to delete the record, so probably the Helm client should return an error, a non-zero exit code. Same idea. So, okay. There was a pull request for that came through, which started me down this rabbit hole of going, wow, we're inconsistent. All right. Well, that was all for that one that I had.
Just one quick question. By return an error, logic that in the past would have fared.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Something about returning an error with a logic with a path?
If we return an error where we were not returning an error before, will that prevent the subsequent steps from executing that prior?
Okay. Matt, are you there? Can you hear us?
Uh-oh.
Okay, you're back. So, all right. So will it stop us from preventing? These are the things we're doing are cleanup steps. The release has already been installed or upgraded here. In this case, it's all upgraded or rollback. That has already worked. These are more managing our own internal releases. So it won't affect the end user's stuff because we do our cleanup after all of their stuff has been accomplished.
Okay.
Scott had a point to make, though, that we should probably get on the record.
Yeah, I think this is along the same lines as what Butcher just asked, though. Because my question was really whether we could consider this a patch if it changes the behavior for end users. And from what I'm hearing from Farina right now is, yeah, it can, because this is really just a deferred error. All the other things still happen. It's just, we could consider this a bug fix in a sense, because whereas before we were giving the wrong code the wrong code and now we're giving the right one at the end.
All right, awesome. Next topic, Farina wants to talk about GitHub discussions, and I made the GitHub discussions face. I'm dropping a link in the chat about a repo that turned it on and regretted it. But Farina, what do you want to decide or talk about GitHub discussions?
Okay, so we have lots of issues that come in that are on similar topics that are support requests, and they end up getting closed out. They end up, it becomes not just one canonical place because, well, people will search for it and they won't see anything open, so they'll file a new issue. And there isn't necessarily one place that encapsulate those, but discussions last longer than issues. And so I didn't know whether we wanted to try to use discussions to let people have some of these discussions outside of things, and they're using the issues for now, basically, the issue queue. And I didn't know what folks thought about that. I thought I would entertain it. I noticed Homebrew is using discussions. I'm not sure what they think about it, but I noticed they were doing it because of the whole bin tray now. They've got a short window to migrate all their bottles off bin tray. And I noticed they were having that in a discussion. And so I figured we should discuss the idea of discussions.
Yeah. So yes, Butcher, it is basically Stack Overflow by GitHub. So my big alert is the people over in the .NET ASP.NET Core repo turned on discussions. Then last week they turned them off because they said you have no ability to label or assign anything. And so they couldn't triage or track what discussions had been looked at, who had the next step. So maybe we would use them in a totally different way, but at least one major repo out there tried them and found that they didn't have the same kind of management granularity that issues had. So that's my primary. I haven't used them at all myself, but that's my primary, like, oh, would we be making it harder for ourselves?
Do we, if it's Stack Overflowy, do we have any obligation to pay attention, or is this where we let Helm users and chart developers and stuff discuss different strategies for doing? Is there a way to clarify what a discussion is for? Or I've never tried this feature.
There is. I can give like a quick pros and cons from using it in other projects if that's helpful. One big pro is that you can, there are default categories, but you can edit the categories. The default categories are Q&A, or sorry, proposals, general discussion. Anyway, there are several categories. And it's very nice in that way because when a user creates a discussion, it's similar to issue templates where you get to pick the category. And we can also change that category. Unlike issue templates, however, we can change the category at any point if maintainers want to organize them. So that's pretty nice. The other thing is when someone gives an answer, like on the discussion, and then you can have threads on that answer, exactly like Stack Overflow, the user can pick the answer as the answer, or the comment as the accepted answer, or maintainers can do that too. So that's pretty valuable for helping lead from, I suppose, a canonical answer if we want to do it that way. And as far as maintainers needing to keep track of it, I think that's really just up to, as you were saying, Matt, can we clarify that? Yes, we can. So we can actually make the first discussion topic, and we can pin discussion topics, and the first discussion topic can be what, in fact, they recommend it, saying something like, welcome to discussions for Helm. And we can just clarify what our process would be there. I guess the question would be, do we want to say that we're monitoring it or not? But we can do it. One con in the pros and cons list I just want to highlight is that unlike issues and PRs where there are automatic backlinks, that feature is not available in discussions yet. So that's a little bit annoying. So if you comment, yeah, if you see what I mean, if you comment on an issue saying we're moving to discussion, that won't automatically show up as a backlink in discussions yet, but we can work around that temporarily by just adding them.
I mean, fresh off of issue triage this week, it is apparent that a lot of people ask support questions that have been answered many times in the past, but in order to keep the issue queue clean, we close those issues when they come in. And then it becomes incumbent on us to say, okay, well, 2 years ago, somebody asked this, here's the issue, close. It would be kind of nice to have the Stack Overflowy bit. I just am not sure if we could handle the moderation overhead of that.
Yeah, Joe Thompson said something in the chat that I don't know if he wants to say aloud or if he wants me to summarize, but around the moderation.
Yeah, just because my experience of this kind of thing in the past is that people, you know, even people with good intentions tend to feel a little bit freer in what they say in that kind of environment than when they're commenting on something with a specific purpose, like an issue. And so I could see this being an area that is more likely to become code of conduct enforcement quagmire than probably the issue. I don't know what the issue moderation already looks like. I've seen some things where people commented and got kind of a little smack on the hand, but if anything, I would expect this to be more of a burden than issue code of conduct enforcement is now. It definitely would not be something that you could just let be off in its own corner and not pay attention to.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we would get some benefits from it probably, and we would also then incur at least one more volunteer per week to look in on it. So it doesn't come for free, right? That's kind of my summary of it. Is we would have to put some time into it to use it. Does that seem, anyone want to add anything to that?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. But in terms of time, the most important, what would be required of us generally is answering questions, not doing additional work beyond that.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like it's people, at least lazy consensus. We seem like we're interested in possibly seeing where this could fit into our triage, question answering, FAQ, et cetera, workflow.
Let me make a suggestion. I can send an email to the other Helm maintainers about it, just to bounce the idea around, and maybe even take it to the Helm mailing list itself, just to bounce the idea around to see what folks think about it. And if y'all are interested, I know it's a little extra work, but go take a look at some of the other places where folks have done it, and just because I've only briefly looked at it, just to see how it works, and maybe we could revisit this in a week or two, and I'll make sure it gets put on the agenda.
One other thing we might want to note, at least in the .NET ASP.NET issue, or sorry, the issue in their repo where they talk about turning off their discussions. What happens to existing discussions? They will no longer be visible. But as far as we can tell, GitHub still keeps them. If we ever enable discussions again, they'll come back. And that's also very interesting. Like, oh, okay, so if we decide to use this and it becomes kind of another knowledge repository, we might then not be able to turn it off if we want to keep it visible.
I can test that. I have a report with that on.
It just sounds like if this is a one-way trapdoor function, we definitely want to know what we're getting into before we jump in.
Yeah, I'll actually check that right away, like as soon as I have a little break. So you want to assign me that? I'm happy.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Matt, or Farina rather, sorry, a good idea. I can link the way Flux uses discussions if you want to.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, you can see one nice thing also, back to Butcher's question, is, you know, kind of like the pros and cons. One other pro is, you might know this already, but answered questions or answered discussions don't ever go away. You can filter, however, just for answered questions. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great.
I think we're good with this one. We can get on to the next.
Okay.
I just want to really quick.
Yes.
So I'm mega confused by what the purpose of it is, I guess.
It's like a Stack Overflowy feature built into GitHub for reasons.
Okay. What's next? What is GitHub going to do next? But what I think I was going to say is there's actually a discussions that I think is similar format for the internal teams in the organization. And that might also be a more useful usage of the discussions versus chatting in Keybase, which is more, I
Yeah,
don't know, it doesn't give you context, and it keeps it in GitHub so you can link things to issues. And
yeah, and this is more, we're looking at it as another place instead of issues, because so many discussions and support topics and answered things come up in issues, that this is a general issue area discussion for users of Helm around topics and questions and things like that. That's what we're looking at discussions for.
Yeah, I
Nothing
think
like Keybase or Slack or anything like that. Maybe you and I can connect offline about it.
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds like what Josh might be alluding to is the separate topic of Keybase, Discord, Slack, other, and that's a different question entirely.
So
And
we've got 8
probably
minutes left and
worthwhile.
2 topics.
All right,
So,
let's talk about CI. Farina, Butcher.
all right, Butcher, I don't know if you saw, I added your name on this. So we
Sorry,
have,
but I'm still pondering GitHub stories. What was the?
it's a joke.
Sorry, chat distracted me.
All right, I'll make this quick though.
What are we talking about?
There is a lot of Helm use in CI these days, and most of the time it downloads a fresh binary of Helm. And like other projects out there, that's using a lot of bandwidth. And I know on Helm, it actually, well, we're sponsored, and that's great. It does cost us a fair amount of money every month to pay for all of those downloads. I was doing some quick numbers on Homebrew, and Homebrew for their downloads, which their bandwidth I think is less than ours, less than ours, is still over 25 grand. They have to fork out, or a sponsor does, just for their downloads every month, right? That's the equivalent. And a lot of this is tied up in CI systems that download a fresh install of Helm every time it runs through the CI system, right? That's also not very efficient on your ingress, your egress, and just the way the internet works of always pulling down stuff. And so I was trying to figure out, are there ways that we can come up with recommended practices we can give to people that are more efficient on CI usage via caching or other things? Like, how could we make smarter GitHub actions for folks? So if folks are using Helm in there, it is far smarter on caching. So it just pulls down and deals with less stuff. And I wanted to, I don't know if you want to add anything to Matt, but that's something he and I were talking about this week. Nodding. Okay.
No, I don't have anything to add. That captures what I was concerned. But baseline, it would be nice to have pre-baked GitHub actions that we can point people to and say, copy and paste this and then change it to fit your needs, rather than curl bashing a bunch of things. And that's probably good practice anyway for us to prescribe some stuff there.
Okay, so that's an action item to get more prescriptive about how we want people to do that.
Yeah, and also with your GitHub Actions, like we have our own GitHub Actions, and I bet you they download Helm each time, just so it can be a JavaScript wrapper in the basic VM, because that's what GitHub Action provides. So to see if we can come up with a smarter way to do some of this, that might be a good thing. I don't know what that would look like, but just to consider that in the case of overall efficiency. With that, I'll
Okay.
cede, because I know Scott has one too.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, just as a reply, we currently have, we recommend using the Azure set of Helm action, and I'll look into that to see how they do it. You could give me that action item, Matt, if you want, or sorry, Farina. I keep saying that.
Sure, that's fine. Sure. If you want to chase after that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I've looked into we have used artifacts a bit in GitHub Actions, but I've never looked into a persistent artifact across jobs. So I can take a look and see how that kind of caching might work for us. Yeah.
Don't artifacts store that so people can download it? So you can create like a binary and then store it there so somebody can download it. That's a little different than storing something like your curl bash elements that you want to store between things. That's almost like storing your library dependencies, like node modules, something like that. And there is a way to cache that between runs in GitHub Actions. I've just never considered it for binaries, especially when your binary version can change over time.
Yeah, I just meant that's GitHub Actions way of caching, between runs, but I want to just look into that and make sure that it works. And I know how we can do that in Circle CI too. So if we could also just have some documentation, on how to do this in some of the main. Anyway, thanks for bringing it up. If I can be assigned to that one, and I'll look into that too.
Awesome. And then Scott, you had one question about CRDs during Helm upgrade.
Right. We definitely don't have enough time to fully answer it, but I can introduce my question. I know we only have 4 minutes and we still have to pick.
Get us started, and then we'll talk about it on next week.
Yeah, that sounds great. The question, in short, to put it on a bumper sticker, is this. Currently, we do CRD installation if they are listed in plain YAML format inside of the CRDs directory. And that's how we do that in Helm 3. It checks, if that CRD is already in the cluster, it won't try to apply. It'll be like, okay, cool, got it. Here's a question. It's really more about updates. Different chart maintainers, different charts. For example, Cert Manager and a number of others that rely on CRDs have manual instructions on how to update those CRDs or add them when you upgrade, right, from one version to the other. My question is, could we on Helm upgrade have this essentially the same functionality or a similar functionality that we do on install, but instead of just checking if the CRD exists at all, check the CRD version. And if there's a new CRD version in there, just go ahead and apply it just as we do it on install. That's my question. The idea there, just quick context, is the idea there is that chart maintainers wouldn't have to give manual steps any longer. Yes.
Well, so then there's the case of, let's say you've got a multi-tenant cluster, which these people don't know about each other, but you've given them access to do CRDs, which is totally a plausible situation. And now somebody relies on the old version, somebody relies on the new version, and then there's some mismatch there. When somebody does and updates it, they may break that other multi-tenant person who doesn't know about it. Now, if you're using charts in kind of a cluster operator capacity, that cluster operator capacity should probably know these things and not screw things up. But if you open that up to others who aren't cluster operators but have too wide of permissions, then they can screw up other people and break production in a multi-tenant cluster. And so that's the problem, is we give people the ability not to shoot themselves in the foot, but to shoot somebody else in the foot in that cluster. And that's kind of a big fear. What I would suggest is 2 things. One, if you haven't read this and we need a better place for it, read this doc that Butcher put together. It's on a pull request. We need to come up with a better place for it. Read that, because it explains a lot of the pitfalls and screw ups that can happen with CRDs. And if we don't take care of that, people are going to end up hurting each other. And that's the problem. We're super conservative because we don't want to break anybody's production. And so read that. The other thing to look at is, if you do want to be able to upgrade things, here's the methods that we have in documentation. And one of them is to use a separate chart. And that separate chart, you can just stick them, you don't have to put things in the CRDs directory. If you're actually using custom resources in the same chart as CRDs, then you need a CRD chart. And so you can install those first. And you can do that, and you can put them in the templates directory and do upgrades and everything just like you normally would. You just have to make a dependency. And if you're worried about afterwards not deleting them, you can use the resource keep policy, which means even if that chart got uninstalled, they would be kept around if you're really worried about it. So there's the ability to do this with a 2-chart setup where one's dependent on the other, and even make it a hard dependency. And it does just work for the most part, but you can then go shoot yourself in the foot. And so there is something there, but we are at time. So I will shut up now. If you want to talk more about this, Scott, I've got tons of opinions.
Thank you so much, Farina. It turns out we are at time. We will have the special extended edition CRD discussion possibly next week. And thank you all for joining. We will see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.